Hello and welcome to Weekly News Highlights. I'm Kim Dami in Seoul. Here are the keywords that made headlines this week. The Constitutional Court decided to hold a very final hearing of President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment trial next Tuesday. That last session raises the likelihood a verdict will be delivered in mid-March. Talks to put an end to the Ukraine crisis began between high-ranking officials of the U.S. and Russia in Saudi Arabia about without Ukraine. U.S. President Donald Trump even hinted at meeting his Russian counterpart this month. South Korea plans to impose anti-dumping tariffs of up to 38% on Chinese thick steel plates after discovering their potential damage to South Korea's domestic industry, a decision that follows the Trump administration's 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminum imports starting in March. The Constitutional Court will wrap up President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment case after 11 hearings. The president will deliver his closing statement at a session next Tuesday, and it's expected the court will deliver a verdict in mid-March. Our Oh Soo-young leads us this weekend.
President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment trial will conclude next Tuesday with his final statement at the Constitutional Court. The court announced Thursday at Yoon's 10th trial hearing that the next and final session would be held on February 25th, some 74 days after the impeachment vote passed at the National Assembly. The bench will review remaining evidence before the National Assembly's legal team and the president's lawyers each make their closing arguments. Then the Assembly's panel co-chair Chung Chung-nae and President Yoon will deliver their final remarks. The court on Thursday held the last round of witness examinations.
The questions focused on whether the president went through proper cabinet procedures before declaring martial law and whether he'd ordered the arrest of key politicians and judicial figures.
First up was Prime Minister Han Duck-soo, who said there had been anomalies in procedure and substance compared to a standard cabinet meeting. He said the defense minister had not consulted him before recommending martial law to the president, as required by the constitution, and said no minutes were taken. Han stopped short of judging whether or not a legitimate cabinet meeting took place, saying that should be determined through investigative and judicial procedures. Former National Intelligence Service Deputy Director Hong Jang-won, who was a witness earlier this month, returned for further questioning by Yoon's legal team. Hong previously testified that he'd made note of 14 to 16 figures to arrest under martial law, claiming that he'd written it in the night outside the residence of his boss, Director Cho Tae-yong. He received the names from Defense Counterintelligence Commander Yeo In-young, who Hong phoned as the president had told him to help out the commander. But Hong changed his words on Thursday, saying he had been in his office after all. His boss told the court last week that Hong had lied about his whereabouts, citing CCTV footage. As Hong and Yoon's lawyers clashed over the veracity of his note, which was reproduced and altered various times, the president spoke out, saying the debate misses the point. He said he'd called Hong to encourage him to work with Yeo on hunting down spies, without mentioning martial law. He pointed out that Hong was the one who called the commander, made notes, and then held on to them until he was dismissed from the NIS. National Police Agency Chief Cho Ji-ho also stood witness after 2 absences due to illness. He refused to answer most questions due to his own criminal case, but said he testified truthfully to prosecutors. Cho said Yoon called him 6 times on December 3rd and told him to arrest lawmakers. Based on past presidential impeachment trials, a verdict is likely to be reached within 2 weeks around March 11th. Former President Park Geun-hye's impeachment was upheld in 11 days, while former President Roh Moo-hyun's was dismissed in 14 days. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Also on Thursday, the president attended the first pre-trial session of his criminal trial, becoming the first sitting Korean leader to do so on insurrection charges after declaring martial law back in December. Our Peun-ji reports.
The first preliminary hearing of President Yoon's criminal trial on Thursday morning lasted only around 13 minutes. In a suit and a red tie, Yoon was present at the Seoul Central District Court. He was not required to attend, as a defendant does not have to be present at a preliminary hearing. So eyes were on whether if he would speak for himself, but he remained silent throughout. Yoon's lawyers said they need more time, asking for 3 more weeks to review records. The court said the next hearing is on March 24th and said it would proceed with the trial afterward. Meanwhile, a separate hearing was also held to review Yoon's request to have his detention canceled. Earlier this month, Yoon's legal team asked for the court to release the president, having been at the Seoul detention center since his arrest. His lawyers argued that Yoon was indicted a day after the detention period expired on January 25th, while the prosecutors said the whole process was done in a legal manner. The court on Thursday said both sides have 10 days to submit any additional documents and said it would make a decision after a thorough review. Thursday's session marks the start of a criminal trial that could lead to life in prison or even the death penalty for Yoon if found guilty of insurrection. Yoon has now become the first sitting president in South Korean history to undergo a criminal trial. 배은지, Arirang News.
Officials from the U.S. and Russia met earlier this week in Saudi Arabia to discuss how to end the war in Ukraine. But Ukraine was not invited to the talks, leading to concerns. For more details on the outcome of the meeting, we have our foreign affairs correspondent, Eunji. Welcome back, Eunji.
Thanks for having me.
So, Eunji, I understand the talks yielded consensus for setting up a separate team to discuss ending the war.
That's right. This was the first high-level talks between U.S. and Russia since Moscow's full-scale invasion of Ukraine 3 years ago in February 2022. The meeting lasted around 4.5 hours, and the two countries agreed to hold more talks and decided to appoint high-level teams to put an end to the war as soon as possible. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio told reporters that he's convinced Russia is willing to engage in a serious process of ending the conflict and said this was the first step of a long and difficult journey.
In order to bring an end to any conflict, there has to be concessions made by all sides.
Rubio's Russian counterpart described their conversation as useful, but said his country will not accept NATO troops in Ukraine as part of any peace deal.
We explained today that the presence of troops from NATO countries under a foreign flag, under the flag of the European Union, or under national flags, it does not change anything. This is, of course, unacceptable to us.
Eunji, like I mentioned, Ukraine and Europe were left out of the talks. Now, they were obviously not happy, right?
That's right. Ukraine showed frustration about not being invited to the peace talks. The country's president, Volodymyr Zelensky, said negotiations to end the war in Ukraine should not take place behind the backs of the parties involved.
You can talk about anything, but no decision can be made without Ukraine on how to end the war in Ukraine. We were not invited to this meeting, the U.S.-Russia meeting in Saudi Arabia. It was a surprise for us, as well as for many.
The latest meeting also led to concerns in European countries, as being left out of the peace negotiations could also impact their security, especially if they're seen as too favorable to Russia. So, in an apparent move to reassure the European countries, Rubio held phone calls with his counterparts from the UK, France, Germany, and Italy and briefed them on the latest meeting.
Now, what did Trump have to say about the concerns from Ukraine and also other European countries?
Well, U.S. President Donald Trump almost suggested that Ukraine was to blame for a war that began only after Russia's invasion. Let's first take a listen to what he had to say.
But today I heard, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal.
He warned the Ukrainian leader that he better move fast to negotiate an end to the conflict or risk not having a nation to lead. Trump also hinted that he may meet Russian President Vladimir Putin this month. In response, Putin said he would also like to meet with Trump, but stressed they need some time to prepare for an effective meeting.
Therefore, some time is needed. How much time will be needed, I am not ready to answer now. But we have a desire to hold such a meeting, and I would like to hold this meeting.
So what can we expect to happen now? I mean, the end of the war?
Well, it's pretty obvious that Trump wants to strike a deal pretty quickly and in a way that politically benefits him, as he promised during his campaign that he would bring a swift end to the war. Experts believe the peace negotiations will pick up speed if the leaders of the U.S. and Russia meet, but say that does not necessarily mean that the war will be over soon.
Presumably once a Putin-Trump meeting would take place, the things would accelerate in terms of trying to bring the war to a close. But in some ways, the war isn't over until Ukraine says it's over.
Both Trump and Putin are willing to meet very soon, but for now, it's unclear whether they will be able to meet this month. But if they do meet, it would be the first face-to-face encounter between leaders of the U.S. and Russia since 2021.
Well, we'll have to follow how things unfold. Anji, thank you so much for coming in today.
My pleasure.
The Korea Trade Commission on Thursday made a preliminary decision to impose anti-dumping tariffs up to 38% on Chinese thick steel plates. Lee Seung-jae tells us why.
Back in July of last year, Hyundai Steel filed a complaint with the government against low-priced Chinese thick steel plates. 3 months later, the Korea Trade Commission launched an investigation into the case. The nation's trade watchdog on Thursday made a preliminary decision to impose anti-dumping tariffs on thick steel plates being imported from China after identifying possible damage to the domestic industry. In its latest recommendation, the KTC will ask the Ministry of Economy and Finance to impose an anti-dumping duty of between 27.91% and 38.02%. The final decision on the levies is expected to be announced 5 months from now. The latest recommendation by the KTC comes amid the Trump administration's decision to impose 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminum imports starting next month. Economists say the higher tariff on steel and aluminum imports to the U.S. will lead to Chinese steel products being flooded into other regions, such as Europe and Southeast Asia, leading South Korean steelmakers to face tougher price competition. Experts also say the domestic steel industry has been hit hard due to oversupply from China and a slowdown in domestic demand. While the domestic demand for thick plates fell in 2023, the proportion of thick plates being imported from China has increased. Last year alone, Chinese imports accounted for 17% of all thick steel plate purchases in the country. The domestic thick plate market is estimated to be around 8 trillion won, or over $5.5 billion. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
On top of steel, aluminum, and automobiles, chips and semiconductors, which ultimately feed the South Korean economy, are next in line to be hit hard by U.S. President Donald Trump's tariff push. With that being said, local chip makers are getting ready to survive another wave of Trump tariffs. Our Lee Soo-jin reports.
South Korea's chip industry is globally recognized for its key role in the semiconductor supply chain. But uncertainties about its future grow amid U.S. President Donald Trump's plans to impose tariffs on imported semiconductors and China's rapid technological advancements.
I've been contacted by some of the biggest companies in the world, and we'll be announcing various very large companies, the biggest actually, and they'll be coming back having to do with chips.
Shifting global dynamics are expected to significantly impact the nation's economy as semiconductors are its top export. In 2024, chips accounted for 20.8% of Korea's total exports, the highest share among all sectors. The tariff threats come as China's CXMT challenges Korea's dominance in memory chips with the successful production of high-performance DRAMs like DDR5 and HBM, both key components for AI and server applications. And this is driving Samsung Electronics to accelerate its technological advancements.
Semiconductors are essential to AI development. Important future developments include bonding technology that builds layers through chipsets and reducing resistance in the back end.
Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix in the third quarter last year had combined market share of a whopping 75.5% in the memory chip sector. But it's not just large conglomerates that are rapidly advancing their technologies.
We have developed a technology that makes materials like Teflon bond well with metals, which was difficult before. This breakthrough is important because it helps create a better foundation for circuit boards.
Yet another local company is supplying big-name firms like SK Hynix and Samsung Electronics with ultrasonic non-destructive testing equipment that scans chips for defects.
Our technology inspects semiconductors before mass production. as we locally produce all our technology, this will also help us avoid tariff-related issues.
The company also plans to further incorporate AI technology as it aims to take part in supply chains overseas as well. Despite concerns over shifting global trade dynamics and competition from overseas, innovation efforts like these are helping Korea's chip industry maintain its edge. 이수진, Arirang News.
Security concerns over Chinese AI application DeepSeek's indiscriminate collection of private data piled up in recent weeks. And according to authorities, the Chinese app has indeed transferred user data to a third party. Our Moon Hae-ryun has the details.
South Korean data privacy regulators have confirmed that DeepSeek, the Chinese artificial intelligence startup facing controversy over data collection, has shared user data with TikTok's parent company, ByteDance. The Personal Information Protection Commission said on Tuesday that although they were able to confirm the transmission of user data, it is yet to determine the exact nature and amount of data transferred. The PIPC launched an independent investigation into DeepSeek's data collection and processing methods after requesting clarification on the matter from the firm last month, finding that DeepSeek's privacy policy fell short of the requirements listed for service providers in the country's Personal Information Protection Act.
Under South Korean law, transferring personal data overseas or moving it from one country to another requires a legal basis. In this case, while ByteDance does have a headquarters in the U.S., when the PIPC says that user data was sent to ByteDance, it means there was an international data transfer. So the concern is whether DeepSeek complied with South Korea's regulations on cross-border data transfers.
The firm acknowledged that it had not fully considered South Korean data protection laws when launching its global service and took the recommendation of the PIPC to temporarily suspend services in South Korea while necessary modifications are made. This means that no new users can download the app across any domestic app market such as Apple's App Store and Google Play, but existing users can continue to use it for the time being as the PIPC considers further measures to protect existing users. During the suspension period, the PIPC plans to continue its thorough review of DeepSeek's handling practices. Legislative efforts are also underway to amend the Personal Information Protection Act to reflect AI innovation with this latest development, strengthening enforcement measures for foreign service providers. Experts say that it will be necessary to consider other AI services for legislative changes, not just DeepSeek.
Clear discussions on what standards should apply to all the new AI systems that will come out in the future are needed. AI is only going to become more widespread, and for it to provide more personalized services, it's going to need access to more of our personal information.
The PIPC also plans to seek stronger international cooperation on AI-related data privacy regulations at the Global Privacy Assembly in Seoul this September. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
The South Korean government says it's committed to providing the necessary protection and support for North Korean soldiers who have been captured as prisoners of war in Ukraine and decided to come to this country. Seoul's Foreign Ministry said this on Wednesday, following a local media interview with a North Korean soldier captured in Ukraine. The soldier in his 20s said he wishes to go to South Korea instead of returning to the north. The ministry noted that North Korean military personnel are considered, quote, our citizens under the Constitution, and that no individual should be repatriated to a place where they may face persecution against their will. It said it has already conveyed such intention to Ukraine and will continue necessary consultations. BTS member J-Hope will once again headline Lollapalooza, this time in Germany later this year. According to his agency Big Hit Music on Wednesday, J-Hope will perform at the Lollapalooza Berlin, which takes place on July 12 and 13. This marks the second time he's taking part in a Lollapalooza event. He was the first K-pop singer to headline the music festival in Chicago back in 2022. J-Hope will also begin his first solo world tour starting in Seoul from February 28th to March 2nd. He will also visit 15 cities including New York, Chicago, Mexico City, and Manila. It's strawberry season here in South Korea, and strawberries cultivated in Korea are also satisfying taste buds all around the world. The secret, our Song Yujin says, is that Korean strawberries are sweet and sour.
From cakes and tarts to canapes and salads and even sandwiches, strawberries dominate bakeries and restaurants across Korea this time of year. But their appeal isn't just local. While Southeast Asia has long been a key market, Korean strawberries are now expanding into new regions. Compared to 2021, exports to the Middle East jumped 40 times last year, while U.S. exports increased threefold.
Until the early 2000s, Japanese strawberries dominated exports to Hong Kong and Southeast Asia. But in 2002, Korea developed the Maehang variety, which has firmer flesh, a longer shelf life, and a sweeter taste, ideal for export. That was the turning point.
It all started here.
So here, the Strawberry Research Institute in Nonsan City, Chungcheongnam-do Province, is where Korea's signature strawberry varieties like this are developed. So far, researchers here have cultivated over a dozen unique varieties.
This institute introduced the internationally popular Maehang and then Seolhyang in 2005, which holds an 80% share of the domestic market. It's also home to trending varieties like Kingsberry, as large as a fist, and Vitaberry, known for its high vitamin content. Developing new strains is a rigorous process, typically taking 5 to 7 years.
We do it through selective breeding with a focus on taste and yield. The flavor must stand out to attract consumers, and a high-yield variety ensures stable supply.
This commitment has shaped the iconic flavor of Korean strawberries.
Korean strawberries offer a unique sweet-tart balance, which is different to many tropical fruits, for example. They also have a juicy texture and softer bite, which makes them especially popular among international consumers.
But the journey doesn't stop here, with researchers working to develop the breakthrough variety.
We're developing new varieties with improved durability for the sake of distribution. At the same time, as climate conditions change, we're also focusing on breeding disease-resistant strawberries.
It's a success story that's getting sweeter. And it looks like the best is yet to come. Song Yujin, Arirang News, Nonsan.
The latest Asian Winter Games in Harbin was another stage for Team Korea to prove their excellence on ice. It was also an opportunity to discover rising stars and the talents, including this speed skater who returned home with 4 medals. Our Park Kwon-woo sat down with her.
2 gold medals, 1 silver, and 1 bronze. South Korean speed skater Lee Na-yeon's achievements at the 2025 Asian Winter Games. Skating since the age of 8, Eve recalls how she began realizing her talent as a young child.
That I won gold medals in most of the races when I first started. So I was very into this sport since I was very young. And I think I enjoyed every moment.
That's how things continued. Last year, Eve broke the junior world record in the 500 meters and then went on to win medals in every race at the Asian Games this year. Although Yi humbly said it feels like she has just taken her first step in her career, she is hungry for more medals.
I would love to win so many races as possible. I'll try to get 100. But I think, honestly, like 10 to 15 is, like my goal right now. Yeah.
Showing her humility, she even said she first needs to improve her skills.
My goal is just to keep showing people that I improved in every races, and also to show them a good conditions in the Olympics. I would love to get a medal, but first my goal is to do all the things that I practice in training.
This mindset ties into her personal life motto.
I always tell myself, let's not make this regrettable. Let's show everything I've got. Keep training hard until your role model become your rival.
Called the next Lee Sang-hwa, Lee spoke with admiration for a role model.
I love that nickname and I feel honored, and it makes me feel like I have to do more harder. If I meet her, I would say I'm a fan of you and I want to be like you, so please watch how I do.
Looking ahead, Lee plans to skate for at least another decade, leaving a message to her future self.
10 years later, I would tell myself to just enjoy skating. Like, no need to get a medal, just keep pushing myself hard. I just do it, as you can always quit.
She also expressed her desire to remain the first athlete that comes to mind when thinking of speed skating, while requesting more support for both the sport and herself. Park Geon-woo, Arirang News.
That is all we have for this weekend. We thank you for watching Weekly News Highlights. Enjoy your weekend wherever you are.